All right. Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the JCI Canada Diversity Inclusion Panel Talk during their national conference. My name is Jen Wutsky. I'm an entrepreneur working in the creative industry as a creative solutions expert and the 100th national president of JCI USA. Our mission is to provide development opportunities that empower young people to create positive change. Our core philosophy is to successfully create sustainable impact in a dynamic world. An organization must be guided by its principles, practices, strategies, and structures that may evolve over time, but our core philosophy remains, which is to inspire confidence, unite communities, enhance equal opportunities, establish justice, embrace cultural diversity, and create sustainable impact. Guided by our core philosophy, we are empowered to create sustainable impact. So today with our talk on diversity and inclusion, we have amazing panelists from all over the country, all over North America, specifically across Canada, and some special guests from the United States. First off, in an alphabetical order, we have Corey M. Curtis from California, USA. He is a husband, father, and served as district manager after leading the Los Angeles region as a top performing general manager for a multi-million-dollar international coffee company. As a certified professional development coach, motivational speaker, and author, Corey is passionate about sharing his valuable personal experiences as a Black man to bring awareness about racial inequality in corporate America. Welcome, Corey.
Thanks. Thank you for having me. Appreciate it.
Awesome. Margot Dirksen from Tennessee, USA. She's a member of the Cookeville JC since 2014 and currently serves as the National Vice President of Chapter Relations, Diversity Committee Education Programming Co-Coordinator, and the Finance Committee member for JCI USA. She is currently the elected chair of the Commission on Status of Blacks and works closely with the Black Cultural Center on the university campus where she works. She was also recently appointed to the Racial Equity Task Force by the university president. Welcome, Margot.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for having me today.
Thank you. Natasha Fisher from Winnipeg. Natasha is deeply passionate about mental health and wellness. She has worked in the mental health industry for nearly 20 years, collaborating with various organizations to promote and improve mental wellness in the workplace. An engaging and dynamic facilitator, Natasha provides training to key stakeholders, including senior leadership and human resources leaders. In addition, her experience includes consulting with people leaders on workplace issues such as harassment, substance abuse, and workplace violence. Welcome, Natasha.
Thank you.
Raul I am James is from Kelowna, British Columbia, currently. Raul spent over 20 years in the corporate world in a variety of roles, performing various tasks alongside good-hearted and well-intentioned people. He is a community builder, facilitator, inspirational speaker, poet, and transformation coach committed to enriching lives and branding a community that is equitable, inclusive, and respectful. His various roles and undertakings include football coach, teacher, speaker, cultural animator, spiritual mentor, various board of director positions, and founder of the Inspired World Cafe. Welcome. Alice Louise Phipps is from Edmonton, Alberta, in Canada, a first-generation Canadian whose family hails from Grenada and St. Kitts and Nevis in the Caribbean. She is a member of Junior Chamber International Edmonton since 2010, and at one point served as the chapter president. She has an educational background in communications. She worked in several industries ranging from software to insurance. She is currently employed by Alberta Pension Services Corporation, working in the Alberta Public Sector Pension Administration. Welcome, Alice.
Hi, glad to be here.
Yes, thank you. Nigan Sinclair from Winnipeg. He is an Anishinaabe, St. Peter's Little Pegus, and an associate professor at the University of Manitoba. He is an award-winning writer, editor, and activist who was named one of Monocle Magazine's Canada's top 20 most influential people and he won the 2018 Canadian Columnist of the Year at the National Newspaper Awards for his biweekly columns in the Winnipeg Free Press. In 2019, he won Peace Educator of the Year from the Peace and Justice Studies Association based at Georgetown University in Washington, D.C. He is an international media commentator as a part of the Power Panel on CBS's Power and Politics and National Affairs Panel on CBC's The Current. He is also a former secondary school teacher who has trained educators and students across Canada. Welcome.
Bonjour. Hello from Treaty 1 territory.
How is everyone doing today? Good?
Great. Yeah, great.
Good.
Great. Glad to be here.
Happy
Excited.
to be alive and part of this. Thank you.
We're so grateful to have you all on here, and I'm excited to get into questions. And so first off, we're going to start with the easy ones. I'd like some of you to help us define, what is your definition of diversity and inclusion? And maybe we'll start with Nigan.
So I realize we have a very big panel, so I'll be very quick here, but it's diversity and inclusion is commitment, meaning that it's in actionable items, actionable voices, and then voices that are followed from communities which have been historically marginalized in the past. True inclusion means that they're part of every element of an organization, they're every element of programming, and they're meaningful elements. They're not just someone at a meeting, they're someone who's leading the meeting.
Right, I agree. Natasha, what would be your definition of diversity and inclusion?
Well, certainly Nigan did hit a lot of the key points. It really goes beyond, it's looking at, when I think of diversity and inclusion, it's really looking at leadership teams in organizations and corporations and seeing members that reflect our community. Those individuals, as Nigan said, who are typically marginalized, being in positions where they're decision makers.
Thank you. And then Corey, I'll ask you as well your thoughts on diversity and inclusion.
Well, you know, I'll break it down just to even simpler terms. You know, really is truly understanding people's differences, that we're all different, right? And once we understand people's differences, the inclusion part is welcoming those differences. And so on the basic terms, just truly understanding that everyone's different and welcoming everyone together.
We agree with that. So for our next question, we want to ask, why is it important to have organizations like JCI involved in the discussion of diversity and inclusion? And I'll actually have Margot give her thoughts on this first.
It's important because we are a leadership organization. And if we're not training our leaders to embrace diversity and inclusion and equity, and then we send them out into the world, or we have them doing things on our behalf, it's not a good look. Just to be very basic, we have a mission that, you know, we bring all the sectors together. And in order to do that, we have to really encapsulate that diversity and inclusion. We have to, you know, be the change that we want to see. And then hopefully that we inspire that and encourage that in others, especially as we partnership and work with other people.
Correct. Definitely a great answer to that, and exactly why we're here with our core philosophies. Raul, what would you think, why would JCI be integral in this discussion?
Well, to almost piggyback on what the last speaker said, I think as an organization that has attracted, you know, future leaders of today, it is important that you're representative of our population, but more importantly, that you are a champion for a level playing field where everyone, doesn't matter of your look, your religious belief, your sexual orientation, has the true opportunity to participate and to strive well in life. So I think organizations like JCI, needs to really, really drum home that message within their membership as you filter out into the world and spreading that message. It's not so much about the message, it's now about walking the message. We've talked the talk for a while, it's now to practice the talk. And my esteemed colleague with the nice fedora on his head said earlier, it is very simple. It is a matter of respect. We're different culturally, but my thing, is that, are we ready to let go of the myth that there's many different races on this planet, as opposed to one race that's made up of 31 different flavors? And we culturally are raised differently, but we practice the same thing with regards to food and song and poetry and so forth. We just practice it. We all do the same things. We just practice it differently. And I think sometimes we get bogged down on that. So I think JCI has an opportunity to, like other leadership organizations, to really encourage organizations that they work with or that they're associated with to not just talk the talk, to walk the talk, and to create a level playing field where everyone, regardless of how you show up, if you're qualified, you can participate.
No, I love that. Yeah, definitely. JCI is here to help broaden people's and individuals' horizons and their perspective and experiences, and we can do that through diversity. Alice, what are your thoughts on JCI's involvement in this?
I think, as the previous panelist said, that diversity isn't just about cultural background or the country that you originally came from, but it's also about abilities and religious backgrounds and everything that make us different. And if you're not leveraging those differences, then you're doing the organization a disservice. So I think that's why it's really important, not only developing leaders, but not excluding ideas from different people with different backgrounds, which could make your organization stronger.
Right.
Well said.
Did someone have things to back off of what Alice just said?
Well, I'll add one thing. I've often said this with Indigenous peoples here in Manitoba or in Canada, but I think this is having to do with something in a broader discussion. If you cannot work effectively, live effectively beside or with or be married to an Indigenous person, a Black person, an LGBTQ person, frankly, you are not prepared to work in this world. You're not prepared to operate in this world. And frankly, you are not prepared to vote in this world. You are not prepared to live in an effective way. And what you do is you foster more conflict that the rest of us have to deal with. And it is of interest to you, not just in terms of your personal life, but in terms of your economic life, your social well-being. Every aspect of your life is working with a person who is different than you.
Well
Right.
said. Well said.
Corey, what are your thoughts on that topic of coming off of that? I mean, I definitely agree that, we need to, if you have issues with other people that might stem from internal issues and needing to deal with your own personal things and moving forward, other ways that JCI can be involved in this discussion.
Well, unfortunately, I was never part of the organization. To be honest with you, I just found out about JCI within the last couple of years, and it really, when I found out, I said, "Oh my gosh, where were you guys? 10 years ago when I was eligible." And so from the outside looking in, had I known about the organization, I definitely would have participated and been very active. And so I guess where I'm coming from is and you may be doing this, again, this is from the outside looking in, But when people are aware of what the positivity of what you guys are doing, I believe that you can attract more people of color had I known. And that's not to say that it's anybody's fault, but it's going into those communities where we are so that we can see like, oh my gosh, there's this organizations that's teaching leaders to be, better leaders, teaching them about skills and all that, which, there's so many talented people of color that would love to be a part of groups and organizations like you all's had we known about it. So being able to get out into the community and just share, and with, social media today, it's a lot easier to spread the word and spread the message of your organization so that it can reach people like myself that would love to participate and be a part of your organization so that we can keep this diversity going.
Right. Raul, you had some feedback?
Yeah, I just wanted to add, I think, and Corey, you made some very valid points. I think one of the things JCI can really stress, a couple of things they can really stress. I think when you are self-empowered, you're self-aware of who you are, when you have a greater understanding of yourself, when you've made peace with your past, and what I'm really saying is when you as a person has really understand what it means to love yourself and understand your purpose in this world. For me, I find I really don't have time for that low vibing energies of racism and all these other things. Not to say I'm denying it exists, but I think when you're strong with yourself, you do not give into that type of fear. So I think JCI has an opportunity, not just with its membership, but with people it comes in contact, of how important self-awareness and that self-mastery work is. And to Corey's point, I think, JCI can do themselves a great service by extending their networks and going into areas that don't know about JCI. So, if it wasn't done in the past, it's not to say have guilt and shame from it, it's to learn. And this is one of the things I'm noticing, but we're holding our past and beating each other up with it as opposed to learning from it. So I think, JCI has a tremendous opportunity in the landscape of our present day to have a tremendous effect into helping us to be more inclusive. I don't necessarily focus on diversity. I think if you're truly inclusive, diversity will take care of itself. So.
That very inspiring words and very true comment about how it will just happen if you're living it and walking the walk. Natasha, did you have any thoughts to add to this conversation?
I mean, a lot of it was said. I think JCI definitely has a very unique position, being that we are an international organization. We have members around the world, different countries, different races, different religions, different genders, sexual orientation. So we really are in a unique place to leverage that and bridge any gaps, if you will. I know that's one of the terms for this year within our communities, but also not being afraid to have those conversations internally within our own chapters. Not being afraid to see where within our own chapters we might be lacking diversity or lacking inclusion.
Wow. Yes, that's very true. So I'll now pose the question, from your guys' opinion and what you may know or not know of JCI, what are some strategies that you might recommend for organizations like JCI Canada or to diversify and attract younger generations into this movement and this opportunity that is happening right now? So Raul?
Yeah, well, I think, to Natasha's point, I think, first of all, you need to go back internally. I'm a guy that believes everything goes from the inside out. So, what does diversity and inclusion mean to JCI today, present day 2020, in regards to the current landscape that we're living? So, I'd want to know from every member, every chapter across Canada, the US, and wherever JCI is, before you go back into the community, what does it mean to you? Put forth a committee, depending on the size of your chapter, but put forth a committee that can really look at those things and have the conversations that are really needed to be had, because right now people are afraid to have the conversations. We're talking, but sometimes I'm concerned about the conversation we're having. And then is to also, it's not in a silo. Whenever you're looking at diversity or inclusion policies, they definitely need to be aligned with your vision and your values and your goals. So it's an opportunity for organizations like JCI to go, do our visions and our values and our goals truly reflect that diverse landscape that we now find ourselves operating in? So I think the first order of business is to look internally, like Natasha said, to go, where are we with this? What does it mean? What are the short gaps? What are the fears that we have individually and as an organization around this topic?
Justin, can I say something real quick?
Yes.
Just to kind of piggyback off of Raul and Natasha, I totally agree. I like how Raul was saying that, putting together different part of each internal organization, each chapter, putting together a group that can possibly partner with other organizations, maybe reach out to, obviously the large ones, say the NAACP and how that's a national and international organization, but partner with them and say, hey, let's do something together. Is there something that we can do together? That way you are expanding on your network, building relationships, and then growing, together. And so I definitely also, with what Natasha was saying, kind of look within. One of the things that I saw in the JCI Creed was, one of the things was the service to humanity is the great work of life. And so the service to humanity being human, being all. So it's not about, us, our individual thing, and we're going to serve. No, it's humanity. And so going back to your mission statement, going back to your creed, and really following what it is that you are designed to do, and just be true to that.
Right.
Justin?
Yes, Margo.
As we're talking about attracting younger generations into our movement, I think with the internal, you also have to look at what these younger generations are attracted to. A lot of the protests and different things that have went on have been led by this younger generation. They have shown us that they want their voices to be heard and they want that choice. And in order for us to be a choice that they make to be involved in our organization, we have to make sure that we are doing things to attract that spirit of doing, and looking and making sure that we have things that speak to their visions and their purpose, that also at the same time collaboratively also feel the JCI mission and purposes as well. And I think they go hand in hand, but we just definitely need to make sure that we are really updating and keeping innovation in our front pocket to kind of keep in tune with this newer generation to attract them, because we need them to help us spur us forward and have a pulse on what's really going on in our world, as our organization tends to be on the older range, and we want that younger demographic. So I think it's really important to see what this younger generation is interested in and how, and be collaborative. I know Corey said that to talk to organizations that cater to these young people and partner, and making sure that we have a pulse on what is really important and meaningful to them, to be able to put those together and move forward in a meaningful and purposeful way.
Can I just add to what Margot's saying there? Only because, I can't agree more that the issue that this younger generation, and I used to be that generation, but now I'm in the positions in which I'm teaching or I'm a professor for that generation. The the thing that I've said about this generation that's coming into workplaces, that's coming into organizations, is they're coming in with a critical mass that's probably never been there before. And in many ways, they're coming in with an awareness, a training. Many of our parents' generation and ourselves have worked very hard in order to equip them with knowledge. For example, in Canada, many people didn't know about residential schools. They didn't know about the Indian Act. They didn't know about racialized policy that was devised on Nazi Germany and apartheid South Africa, which defines Canada. So as they're coming into the workplaces, the issue is not really so much that people are brought into organizations. It's the atmosphere within that organization that's often what will force them out. So coming in isn't the issue as much as keeping them there. Appealing to people, being innovative to that young generation to be able to come in. So what that really involves is a chapter or a workplace being innovative enough to look at their own history of policy and procedure and their makeup. And for instance, I think if you're a chapter and you look at the leadership history of your chapter and you see that it's all white and male, that is indicative of your cultural fabric of your chapter. If you have all of your policies and procedures which have only catered to certain communities that are privileged, that are in a certain class, for example, that are only in one area of the city, then that is indicative of the culture of your chapter, of your organization. And these are the kinds of hard questions that it really takes place that involve discomfort. And what a friend of mine who works within Indigenous and non-Indigenous reconciliation in workplaces, she says, if it feels good, it's probably not what you want, the kind of conversation you want to have. The conversations we need to have and what young people are looking for today, which I think is different than the past, is they are looking for uncomfortable conversations. They're not afraid of uncomfortable conversations. They're not afraid of forcing those uncomfortable conversations in cities, on the streets, in media. And on Twitter, for example, just look at the kind of ways in which young people are, heavily invested in the conflicts on Twitter, and so there's a kind of a different mentality that's being brought in terms of diversity and inclusion, where people also want to move very quickly. And so, saying, oh, we're going to do this over 5 years is just not going to cut it anymore. It needs to happen in terms of commitments today, and it needs to be, in order to appeal to that younger generation to be brought in, it needs to be bravely done and not something that's that there's a lot of eggshell walking. I think there's got to be a lot of confidence and bravery.
Right. And Nigan, why do you think why is this a continued problem? Why maybe has it just all of a sudden exploded and arisen at this time?
Well, I think we have panel members here who can probably add to this, but I would just say, well, one of the biggest obstacles we have to face is white fragility. And that we have the issue in which people who have been in power, most historically, oftentimes from white communities, have put themselves in positions of power in every segment of society. And when we begin to question why is it that that's the way it is, and how can we change that, how can we make it diverse and inclusive, truly, not just ornamentally, there's a lot of discomfort, there's eggshell walking, there's people whose feelings get hurt and say, well, I'm not a racist, or I have a Black friend, or I'm married to an Indigenous person. That's not inclusion, that's not diversity at all. What is changing your own perceptions and your place within the universe and your engagements and your relationships as a result of looking at those really hard questions of who you are, and then acting differently. And that's what the hope would be. It's not just, of course, we're talking about white people, but I mean, because we are talking about how do we change radically, that's a big issue that's going to come in. It's also about how do we create inclusive language? How do we create policies and that can appeal to the most amount of people? And how do we create something that is really invested in equality, true equality across people of all races, genders, sexualities, and put those in for the long term so that they continue to change us going into tomorrow, because the issues we're facing today are going to be different tomorrow.
Right. Natasha, could you piggyback off of this, why is this a continued problem?
Well, to be frank, like we live in a society where the default is white. We live in a white supremacist society. It doesn't mean that everybody who's in there, who lives, especially those of us who have white privilege, are white supremacists, but we benefit from it. Like this is part of the difficult conversation when we, and you know, when Nagan talked about white fragility, I totally get that. How many times where maybe I felt like my back got up, and it's like, this isn't about me. Like if I'm committing to this work, if I'm committing to service to humanity, it is about getting uncomfortable, and it is having those uncomfortable conversations. There's something that really has stuck out in my mind. An Indigenous woman in Winnipeg has referred to it in regards to people being either complicit or silent. Maybe you're not actively causing harm, but your silence is, and its silence is violence. And so that's what I have been, that's something that I keep in my head where, you know, if I'm faced or I'm part of a conversation that perhaps is making me feel a little more comfortable, it's like, this is my place where I'm supposed to be using my voice and leaning into that, and, you know, not contributing to that silence is violence.
Right. Wow. Alice, I'd love your thoughts on this.
I think one of the main things is looking at your organization's culture. Looking at the history of presidents in JCI Edmonton, very, very, very white. And I mean, that's not a bad thing. It's not a criticism, but, you know, there have been Black people in Canada since the 1600s. There are Indigenous people, you know, we're on Cree territorial land out here. Just looking at that, that's kind of telling of where the roots of this organization are, and how prevalent that kind of mindset that this might be maybe an elitist organization, which isn't what it is at all, but it's the perception. Is when you're coming into somewhere and you're looking around and you don't see any faces like yours, do I belong here? And I mean, that's not anyone's fault, but it's something that you need to be cognizant of. And if you're really serious about diversity, you need to say to yourself, okay, well, we have, you know, 15 members. Out of these 15 members, how many of them are women? How many of them are people of color? How many of them are not default Christian? And I think we're coming to that point where young people want to see the diversity in an area, and if they don't, they start questioning whether or not this organization actually reflects their values.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Any other thoughts from the other panelists? Yeah.
I think part of, you know, one of the things I focus on is mindset. And, you know, when Corey talked, Nagan talked about history, residential school, and someone just mentioned white fragility. We have to remember, we live in a country whose demographic is still 72% considered Caucasian. So when they say Canada is so white, it is white because by demographics, we are white overall. Now, depending if you live in Toronto or Montreal, Vancouver, or the other centers, you have more diversity with regards to ethnicity. But for me, it doesn't matter if it's a predominantly white country from a population standpoint, because diversity could also exist in that. And I also understand, you know, one of the problems is a lack of history, and I think Nagan kind of touched on that. White people, and we all actually have been cheated on history, and to not fully understand the contributions of natives, of Blacks. The first Black man in Canada was in 1608, and he was hired as an interpreter. There's history that we have been denied, and particularly a lot of white people have been denied history of other ethnicities. So you got to remember, white people have been conditioned to believe a certain narrative because of conditioning. So why I say that is because, I have a series of talks that I'm doing here in Kelowna called Beyond the Discomfort. Before we can go beyond the discomfort, we need to step into discomfort and understand when these topics come up. I can't remember the young lady's name who said, her back goes up. It's going to go up because you're being challenged against things that you weren't conditioned to understand. So I think there's a degree of history, not that we need to become historians, but I think we need to understand the history, the true history, that Natives and Blacks aren't savages. When first contact happened, you had nations in this land doing wonderful and amazing things. They just were different than the Europeans that didn't value it, and it didn't make the history books. February is Black History Month. For those that have been educated in Canada, in the US, but particularly in Canada, how much Black history do you remember ever studying or being taught? So it's not just about understanding the history of JCI and the past presidents, because I'm actually not surprised Edmonton would have predominantly all white male presidents, because that's the biggest demographic. But I think these types of things match the history that we've been taught, and we've been done a disservice by not being taught the full history of all the participants that make up Canada. Even though she is 72% considered Caucasian, even in that 72%, there is diversity within that Caucasian, because there is no one white culture. So I think we have an opportunity, and JCI has an opportunity to be a leader in helping bring some of that history forward and helping people to understand the contributions that many have made to this nation, or both countries.
If I can add to that, like with what Raul was saying, it reminds me of this quote that I loved from the documentary 13th by Ava DuVernay.
Mm-hmm.
It was something along the lines like, history isn't something that just happens. If you're white, it's the result of some of the choices that your ancestors made. And if you're not white, it's the result of choices that your ancestors did not make. Yet here we all are together.
We're all here.
Now we have to understand what happened in order for us to move forward.
Yes.
And 100%, there's a lot of history that we were not taught, or, here in Canada and definitely in the US. Why is it that I didn't know about segregation in Canada? And again, this could be my own ignorance and privilege, for sure. But why did I not know about segregation in Canada until, we have Viola Desmond put on the $10 bill?
Mm-hmm.
Last residential school was closed in 1996, so did not learn about residential schools at all throughout elementary, high school, or even in university. Really understanding how devastating and that the Indian Act is, and it's still a piece of legislation that exists. That being said, yes, these are things that we're not taught, but we also have to take our own responsibility. Now we know there's a lot of history we were not told. Now it's on us to learn it.
Mm-hmm.
And also, like, the fact that all of our histories are intertwined, I think, enlightens us and grows us into a sense of place and a sense of purpose. In Manitoba here, so, you think to yourself, how many Black people are in Manitoba? There's not a high percentage. We do form approximately 20% as Indigenous peoples, this place, and, up to 30, 40, 50% of certain communities in Manitoba, because of the fact that we have, deep ancestry and so on. But the Manitoba's economy was built predominantly on the Hudson Bay Company, which is the fur trade of the 19th century, built predominantly to build the train line across Western Canada, built off the exploitation of the bison. So anyways, the reason why I'm giving you that very quick history lesson is it was built by the Hudson Bay Company, which began and grew globally because of its profit off the slave trade. And so what does that tell you? That tells you that the The oceanic slave trade from Africa to the southern United States built the economy of Manitoba. And that means that as we understand that, we can't say to ourselves, well, you know, Black people are going through this issue in the United States right now involving race and Confederate statues and so on. That is our history too. We're a part of what is happening in southern United States cities right now in terms of racial relationships. We're the outcome of that. And that's not even an issue of thinking about yesterday. We're talking about right now, today, Manitoba's economy.
Well said.
So, how do we want to shift into how we address this and the looking at focusing on approach, opportunities, and connection. What is everyone's advice for having discussions about things like this with older, set in their ways family members, so that you don't evolve into a fighting, shouting match?
Well,
I want to hear the Americans actually. I want to hear the Americans talk about this, because you happen to be we're all watching you right now go through this.
Yeah, we are. Yeah.
Well, one thing I can say is what not to do. And what you don't want to do is force your opinion on others, because automatically you're going to get the pushback when it comes to you're trying to share your opinion, but you cannot force your opinion on anybody. Mm-hmm. So that's why you do have to have a conversation to truly understand where this person is coming from, why they feel the way they feel, why they do the things they do. It's just like for me, for instance, I'm the only child, and I've always just had it my way. I didn't have to share. I got what I wanted. And when I got married, my wife, she has 2 older siblings. So she had to share. She had to, share with each other. They had to share with each other. And so imagine the argument that we had when I came home one day after work with dinner for myself, not for her, when we first got married.
Holy smokes.
But so you can see the response there. But I didn't know. I was the only child. That's all I knew. I got food for myself. It was always about me until we had the conversation. Of course, it started heated in the beginning, but then after we had the conversation, we understood where each other was coming from. And then I understood, because we're married and we're one, that I can't do that anymore, right? Mm-hmm. So we really have to understand where people are coming from, so that we can understand why they're doing the things that they're doing. And then from there, have a civilized conversation. And then hopefully through that conversation, there is some change that comes out.
Mm-hmm. As someone who has 4 sisters, let's all have a moment of silence for Corey. Because I could, oh gosh, Corey, I'm happy that you're still here.
Right.
I survived. Thank God.
I do think Corey hit on something very important, though, is that you have to listen and see where they're coming from, because, we can't do better if we don't know better. And, we do what we're taught until we decide that we're going to do something different. And I've had several difficult conversations with people who, that's all they know. But my strategy has been, well, why do you think that? And keep pushing them to the root of what it is. And a lot of times it's, well, it comes back to, that's what my parents taught me, or that's what I always saw. And I really try to use personal experience, because if you say you're my friend, if you say that you care about me in some kind of way, but then also in another breath, you're saying that you're okay with people not treating me the way they treat everyone else, that 1 in 3 doesn't make 2. Mm. And, having to get them to reflect and look at it a little different way. But I will also say that it takes 2 to fight. And you will get to the point where some people are not open to it. And you just have to be okay with that. And I can be okay with the fact that I did my best and did my part trying to have that conversation with you, but I can also be okay with walking away from that conversation if, you know, because you have some people that instead of really getting to the issue will deflect to an argument because that's more comfortable than me confronting my own personal bias, my own things that I know I've done that aren't, you know, that are race related, that aren't positive. So we're going to have an argument instead, because then I can still make you the bad guy because you argue with me. And I am to the point that I refuse to do that. And I will just say, you know, well, thank you for your time. This conversation for me is over. And you can continue to have it by yourself if you would like. But sometimes we do have to know when to just walk away. But I think it is very important to go into conversations knowing sometimes, especially with older individuals, that that's all they've ever known. And to ask somebody at 60, 65, well, even 40, because I know for myself being close to 40, it's hard for me to get a new routine, or, you know, change is hard. And we say that all the time. So this is not going to be easy. And it may be a conversation that you have 2, 3, 4 times. But if that person is open, I'm willing to have those conversations as much as you like. If that's going to get you to a better place and get us as a community, as a world, as an organization to a better place, I'm willing to do that. But I think we have to go in this realizing that this is all some people know. And this concept that you might be wrong is very disrupting to their equilibrium. And we need to be conscious of that.
Yeah, so like, does anyone on the panel have any strategies or phrasing or questioning, just strategies individuals could use to guide conversations to be enlightening and coming to an equal ground?
Well,
Rob?
I'll tie back to, you know, when I said, when you're having these conversations or doing this type of work, it starts with you first. So where are you with all of this? Because you have to know you will run into a lot of discomfort from others. So where are you with this? Where are you with your anger? Where are you with your love? You know, I'm a 7 habits facilitator, and one of the habits is seek first to understand, then to be understood, to Margot's point. A lot of people are waiting for the opportunity to practice empathy. It's right now. And the practice of empathy for me is very simple. Am I willing to step out of my narrative, my story, my worldview, to fully engage with you and say, I don't understand why you feel the way you do, but I really would like to understand. I'm not here to judge. I'm not here to say you're right, you're wrong. I just want to understand. Can we do that? We don't have to agree, but I think we should always be respectful. So to me, it starts when you don't want a strategy, it starts with self. Where are you with all of this? Where is your anger in all of this? Because you will be triggered as well, because you got to remember, we're not operating in a silo. We're a part of this. Last night, I was listening to Martin Luther King's I've Been to the Mountaintop speech again. I've listened to it many times. If you ever listen to it, you realize what they were going through in that time is no different than today. The same things we're going through. So I'm listening to him, and he's going, you know, there's something going on in our world. You know, America is sick, change is here. Well, we could say the same thing today. And again, what's going on in the southern states is actually going on here in Canada as well, in Toronto and other places. So my thing is, the biggest strategy is individually start with yourself. Where are you with these energies that we're feeling today? Because you yourself will get triggered. I get triggered. I just don't give in to them anymore, because, you know, when I first saw the George Floyd video, you gotta remember, I'm a Black man. I don't peel this off at night. And my conditioning is no different than many of you. So when I first saw it, it does trigger you. But I also stop myself and go, what are you getting triggered about? I constantly question and look at myself. So when I'm involved in conversation, particularly these types of conversation, we can interject, we can free flow, but I really want to understand why you're feeling the way you do, because I don't get it. And just because I don't get it doesn't mean that you're wrong or you're right. I just need to understand. And I think a lot of times we confuse ignorance and stupidity. Ignorance says, I don't know, but I may want to know. Stupid says, I don't know, and I don't care that I know. And those people, you just have to leave them alone.
What if they're the president of the United States? I mean, I think it's the challenge is that I didn't mean to interrupt you there, Raul, but the challenge is that what Margot spoke about directly was that it's not easy to just simply cast away people who are in positions of power. And so when we're getting back to talking about JCI, I mean, there are elements of power within the organization that we're thinking about, and that are really hard questions. And I completely agree, Raul, that Martin Luther King is an essential way to think about the ways that we engage with violence, or the ways that we engage with issues of racial conversations. But we also need a Malcolm X. I mean, you also need a Malcolm X to at times force the conversation in a non-violent means, in a way in which if that conversation does end, the power dynamics don't stop as well. So it's worth thinking about in terms of thinking about what drove Martin Luther King and Malcolm X, and it was love. And you talked about that, Raul, and we've all kind of touched upon the issue of love. I like many people come from an interracial family. And so a large segment of my family is white and very well off, very privileged, live in the richest area of the country, Alberta. And one of the things is, as a person who's been, organized marches in the streets against many resource projects with Indigenous communities, one of the things that one of my aunts asked me one time, we were at Thanksgiving. Thanksgiving is supposed to be the time of family. And she says, why don't you people stop protesting and complaining all the time? And I'm like, I'm your people. Like, there's no you people here. I am only your people. There's no you people. And so the element of treaty is really a guiding force here, because what Indigenous peoples developed for thousands of years was the notion of family making. And that when you came together to make a commitment, or what we would call a treaty, you would agree to become family. You would agree to never walk away from one another, even if you disagreed, and that you'd be together forever. And that means that love must guide that relationship. And love is sometimes walking away, absolutely, especially if it's an abusive relationship, like with the president of the United States, but realizing that you're still going to be in that tomorrow. Therefore, what is it that you can do in order to act in a loving way, not in a passive way, but in an active, loving way,